Media companies have 3x revenue evaluation. Software companies have 10x evaluation. And they just look at their little rule of thumb. They're like, which one are you? Okay, let's multiply your revenue. So there's like that rule of thumb valuation, and it's real though, because we could take our content management system and build 50 more sites. Because it's our software, and it's not the same as, hey, we're going to take WordPress and white label it and say it's Smooke Press, and now we have there's a level there of like, what are your actual growth paths? And like software is something like with the Noonies is a voting software we built, and now we're going to put it in more types of voting locations. And we build it, and now we have a software and allows people to vote on different items and like securely vote and track votes and that stuff. So there's an element of how do you grow? And sometimes with software, it allows you to be horizontal, as opposed to just saying, I'm just building hackernoon.com.
Cool. All right, everyone. Hello. Today, we're talking with David Smooke, founder and CEO at Hackernoon. Hey, David, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, for sure. Now, for those of you who don't know, Hackernoon is one of the leading tech publications on the internet, and I quote from the website, where hackers start their afternoon. So it may have started with hackers, but the site was founded in 2016 and drives more traffic than Forbes, which was established in 1917, with millions of visitors each month. And so today we'll be talking about Hackernoon's success, including the initial growth, the evolution of it, and then we'll get into the tech stuff, because there's been quite a lot of stuff happening across the blockchain space recently. And Hackernoon, I first heard about just back when we got into the blockchain marketing side of things, and Hackernoon was and still is the place to go for that level of tech news. And before we get started, just make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you get the latest episodes as soon as they're released. David, this is going to be a fun chat. But I thought it would be good to start by talking about Hackernoon and just explaining what Hackernoon is for people who may not have heard about it before.
Hey, great. I'm looking forward to this as well. So Hackernoon is a technology publishing platform. We publish about 30 stories a day by technologists across all different job types, product managers, software developers, founders, CEOs, investors. And then we have an editorial team that will review and improve this content. And then we've built a number of distribution systems like a typical publishing company. But most of our software we build entirely ourselves. So we also have a software team. So we're exploring different ways to kind of push the boundaries on what publishing technology could be and bring our software into more locations than just hackernoon.com.
Okay, that's a really good intro. Let's just take a step back a little bit, right? Hackernoon was your third business, right?
Well, sometimes it's tricky on how you count. So
how do you count it?
A lot of times I've actually just put the failures all into one company. And, I've had a number of failures, and we started, the original name of the company was ArtMap Inc. And we were about scaling people's voice on the internet. And really, I just tried to work with the smartest entrepreneurs I knew. And I would contract with them, get a stake in their company. And then on the side, I was building 10, 20, 30 sites at once and trying to build different content destinations, different digital publishing solutions, different things about I was just curious around text on the internet and how that's going to change and what business models are going to grow around it. And in that time period, Hackernoon became the most popular site. And so slowly but surely, it went from my part-time interest to my full-time focus. And as it made more money, we brought more people on. It was really the first 2 years was just me and part-time people. And then my wife, who's more talented than me, joined, and that's when things started to grow a little more significantly. And it's been a pretty fun ride. Right now, we're at 7 people full time and 8 part time. So I'm enjoying, the life of a small remote team and how to just have fun on the internet together.
And have you always you started a few years ago. There's 7 people now. Is everybody remote?
Well, my wife lives with me.
Except for
But yeah, everyone else is. So our chief product officer, we were friends for 8 years in San Francisco, where I used to live. And then in February, he decided to move to New York City, which was a pretty tough thing to do. So he ended up actually relocating in Colorado. So he's about 2 hours away from me. And then we have 2 people in Michigan, India, Amsterdam, Hanoi. So all over the place. It's nice for editing too. So people get kind of a different perspective, and also they're online at different times. So you get a little more like rolling submissions and a little better response time.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great. And how did you get the idea for Hacker Noon? Because you said you were doing 30 sites or something and you're trying to publish a bunch of content, but how did you get the idea for Hacker Noon?
So originally it was the Hacker Daily, and we built with Medium software for a while before it was Hacker Noon. And, it was just before that, I was with a company called Smart Recruiters, and I built up their corporate blog from nothing to 400 contributors. So this idea of like making a trade-off of helping people get their content online and have it look better online and have the content be a little better and distribute it was something that I had done, with hundreds of people. So it kind of became like, okay, how do I cut out the human parts of those process? Because you remember like 6 years ago, it was still pretty tough to like use WordPress and publish a blog post. Not that it was like impossible. It was obviously tougher like 16 years ago, and 26 years ago is impossible.
Yeah.
So it's like, or ish, so that's like kind of the evolution of it. And just it got much easier to move content around. And I think it's going to continue to get easier with, different plugins and people wanting to speak better to each other, where you own your content, it's in one place, and then you distribute it to Hacker Noon and many other sites. So that's kind of like what I saw as like a trend, is how people wanted to behave. And the challenge of growing your online presence is everywhere. Why are you an expert? Why are you doing a podcast? Like, how do you meet new people? Especially as we're all, in America, we're all locked down. I don't know, maybe it's a little better for you.
It's rolling. Sometimes it's locked down. Sometimes it's not locked down. It depends on the week.
And then with this model, the technologist just makes more sense because they're already writing. They're already using the keyboard all day. They're already writing, documenting how they're coding. They want more people to read the ideas they have, and the ideas is the currency, and the readership of the ideas is the currency. So it kind of hit an industry where, like, if I tried to make a community-driven blog with like manufacturing advice or retail advice, it'd be like a less interesting destination and just less vibrant.
Yeah, sure. And let's just jump back a second to one of the comments you said. You said that that in your previous role, you built up a blog to 400 contributors, and I'm assuming a bunch of traffic, and I'm assuming a bunch of success as a result of that. It sounds like your approach is the contributor-led approach to content publishing. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So our model is our contributors own their content, and they give it a non-exclusive license to Hacker Noon, and we can edit and distribute it. So this is a good model because it's between social media and traditional publishing. If you publish on Forbes, it's a lot of pitching, it's a lot of back and forth, it's kind of a clunky login and submission of content. So like having a good contributor experience is there, but not going as far as anyone can publish and there's no rules here. Every post goes through a second human, and there's quality control issues, there's content improvement efforts, so that's kind of like just a better experience. Like, I think the second human rule is something everyone should use when they post online. Like, let's just be sure a second human sees this before I put it to every human on the planet, or every human on the planet could find it.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of like, if you want to look at like how you could have one rule that would increase the quality of content online, that would be kind of a good one. I think a lot of, sometimes it's a little powerful to have like just the whole internet at your hands, and for people to post things they're going to regret in the future. So I think as we think about the future of the internet, a little more quality control is probably a good thing for how we can, read and write and not harass each other. Yeah,
right. And so your approach is produce a lot more content because you get other people to publish it, right? Like there's often this approach where everyone thinks that I need to create content, just to share with my audience. And so they go out and create it themselves. But your approach is to get other people to contribute that content and to create the location where everybody comes to for that content. Is that right?
Yeah, that's accurate. It's definitely, we're a publishing company that doesn't employ writers. So, it's kind of we employ editors, and we want to improve content, and we all write ourselves, and we all publish, multiple places and stuff like that. But yeah, the core of it, we're creating a destination and a community. And what's your approach in attracting contributors? Yeah, I say, for example, in the previous role, right? Like you got 400 contributors for somebody's blog, right? So how is
Like, how do you approach that?
Well, this may surprise you, but people are pretty vain, and also the internet works a lot on validating multiple sources and having third-party validation for your ideas. So there's always going to be a value in not just saying, I say this and I verify it. Having someone else say it and verify it. And I mean, general is like, as blogging has gotten bigger, especially professional blogging, and like not professionals as in like that's blogging is their job, but professionals know they need to spend time writing on the internet to grow as a professional. As that's become more of like a clear thing, it's been kind of a lot of organic, traffic, and people are honored to be asked, that a site decides would want their stories. And then the best thing for recruiting content is just a good story. A good story goes out, and if it's about JavaScript, you'll see 50 more submissions from that are JavaScript related advice come in. And so the absolute best thing to recruit content is just a great story.
And then how do you kind of get traction on that? Because in the beginning, it would have been challenging to get people contributing when they never even heard of Hacker Noon, right? So how did you kind of just get started in the beginning?
Well, we sent a lot of messages. We asked a lot of people, just like a sales funnel. And so that, we're kind of feeding the market and fueling the market a bit. And then it's something that it builds up over time. A site, as it moves up to higher authorities, a lot more organic good things start happening, a lot more citations start happening. And then you just build a lot more systems to amplify the publish button. When you publish here, who gets emailed? When you publish here, where do social media updates automatically go? How does the RSS feed work? How do we get more traction on all these distribution channels we have? So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to amplify the publish button. The more things that happen the moment we hit that button, the better off everyone is.
Yeah, right. And so I'm assuming then, because it started off as a part-time gig, and it's not a small team, but it's not a huge team. Like you have been bootstrapped. And so I'm assuming that you relied a lot on organic traffic to support that growth. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, today it's still organic traffic. We started bootstrap, but we did raise some money a few years into the operation.
Yep.
But I mean, Google search traffic search and direct are our number 1 and 2 right now. And then, social networks, referrals, emails on down. So, I mean, I've always kind of liked search just in terms of like the pureness of intent. And, if you write very specific titles, you're going to have this kind of long tail intent, as opposed to like, it's a much better traffic than trying to game the Facebook news feed or whatever. And you're trying to, clickbait and incentivize this thing and get this short-term bump, and you're like, it's over. But if you have kind of more specific headlines that will serve people that are at that moment in time many times over, you kind of have a long tail evergreen, group of your library that help you have more stable traffic.
So as part of your process then, when people contribute articles to kind of help change those headlines a little bit to rank higher?
Absolutely. Most headlines are different on the other side after when they come in and they come out. And that's, we've looked around kind of taking some A/B testing tools too, but just in publishing, 65, 70,000 stories, we've kind of learned a lot of trends, and then we kind of teach that to our other editors. And that, creates more, hopefully, long-term benefit for the writer and us.
So without just giving away all of your best stuff, what have been some of those trends that you've found?
I mean, the trends that people know and they don't want to admit are things that are pretty simple, like numbers in the headline work. That's a pretty simple thing of like, it just, it lets people know what they're getting into. Sometimes it can feel a little cheaper. So, that's kind of a tool that you want to use with smart discretion. You can also make fun of it, and you can use it in headlines where it's kind of funny, but it's still a value. I mean, just more specific is like, specificity is a lot of times that what people lack. And especially as you get on to like different, how to integrate this with that, how you write that information. It's actually, you want to know what the intent of other people that are looking for that is. So there's, just a lot of thought there. And just, I hate misleading the reader. Like, I want you to come here because you know what you're going to get. So that's where I think like, and there's also practice, like most bloggers and professionals, they won't spend the 20 minutes to write 20 headlines. Like just that exercise of saying, hey, I'm an editor. This story, I know this headline doesn't work. I don't know what the answer is. Here's 10. Let me take a deep breath, have a drink of coffee, and pick one. And even just doing that moment is something everyone should do. But if you don't, we can do it as with our editors at Hacker Noon.
Yeah, and it's so interesting as well because you spend so much time creating the content, and yet that headline is the number one reason that anyone is going to read that content. But because that content has often taken so long and taken out so much of you emotionally, physically, it's, at the end, you're just like, oh, it's a pretty good headline. I just want to hit publish so I can get onto my next task. Like done, but it's like, it's such a good piece of advice. Spend 20 minutes and write 10, 20 headlines, then step away, then come back,
The other reason people don't do it, it's they put all this work in, but it's also, you have to admit to yourself, where I'm at now is different than where I'm started. What I set out to do was write this. What I did was actually write that, and it's related and it's very good, but it forces you to take a moment of like, I didn't quite do what I wanted, which people don't want to do. Like, I did what I wanted, done. So it's a little bit of both of like why a second human is really helpful there.
That's great. That's great. And so just from an SEO tactical perspective, like, are there any tools which you use to help kind of improve the organic performance at the time of publishing or in terms of the structure itself?
So we'll have tools for writers at that point. Like, we don't have it right now for writers, like in terms of identifying opportunities. And we want to, we're talking to SEMrush about different integrations with them. And I mean, we've used them in Ahrefs or Ahrefs internally, and Google Search Console, and Google Analytics itself as well is pretty useful. And also just, monitoring some terms and learning from there. But, now one of the editors, our AI and machine learning editor, Lamarck, is also our SEO lead. So we take a structure where everyone kind of has two roles for the most part. And he knows a bit more than me, I think. But search is, it's ever changing, and it's something where it's a very dominant market, and that market leader has many other products and is being looked at and they have many other relationships with other companies, and they're being looked at by the government for different things. So it's like, we'll see how that all plays out. But it's probably not going to be as centralized as a market as it is now in the future, because search is, the technology has gotten so much better. Google's advantage over everyone in 2003 is not what it is today. So there's that element of it. And how much do you want personalized search and search based on what I've done before on the internet versus how much do you want search based on pure intent? And what does the aggregate of the internet think when this term comes in? Which, I like that in terms of subject matter expertise, finding what you want to look for, looking beyond my circle. My bubble is my bubble. If they have information, I'll find it. But I really would prefer to take a step away from my bubble and learn what the internet thinks this word means or what I should find when I search for it.
Yeah, right. And just a quick shout out just to one of our clients as well. I have seen what SEO Clarity does, and they've got this awesome AI recommendation engine for content. So just kind of have a look at them as well there, David, because that might just give you some alternate kind of ideas. And they've got some pretty huge clients, man. Like, and
cool.
I just say that because for your site, I think it'd be super interesting to see, just what it could do, right? Thanks for sharing so far. I want to keep going down this path. How did you then take this information, and how did you become a tech platform of choice for so many niche industries, right? It depends on which country you're from, right? But yes, how did you, because I'd heard about you when we got into blockchain, and then as soon as I heard about you, I was like, wow, okay, this is a big site, and all the tech companies, they know you. They all want to be on Hacker Noon. Like, if they're on Hacker Noon, then all of the other kind of like the audience of Hacker Noon is very specific. How did you become that place of choice, or
mostly by showing up every day? There's a lot of just like showing up. Of like, you have days where traffic is higher, traffic is lower. Like, but if you showed up, it just keeps slowly going forward. So there is something of like 4 years of just building up the brand over time, but also a willingness to, with the rise of blockchain, it wasn't something I said to myself, we have to go out and publish more. It's something like good stories were coming in. Some of the most cutting edge tech people were moving, out of software and into cryptocurrency and talking about it. So it's something that, we saw people just talking about it and just let them know, here's a place you can talk about it. And that was definitely helpful. And I mean, coming back to amplify the publish button, the more systems you build where you just have a little more support, And I have a little army behind me that's not just, me and you publishing a story and sharing it to our Twitter. So we get a little more, systems, and that builds up over time too. And, we're pretty good about tracking stats. And, we recently did a investment from Coil, where now writers can stream small micropayments, from Coil subscribers to Hacker Noon writers, or their time spent reading. So there's how do you get more little carrots, and how do you build out these more little benefits, these more mentions, and just how do you serve the contributor? And that's something where, more readers is one of the simplest ways to do it.
So was there an area that started first that had driven the initial traction? Was it because of blockchain and because that went nuts back in 2016, 17, 18? Is that the area which started it, or kind of had it started before that point?
That definitely helped the blockchain rise. And there's been viral stories where people that help, when net neutrality was trending in America, getting a good sentiment analysis of how many of these tweets are actually from bots and which side are they on. That was a story, some data journalism that really helped us. But overall, the simplest thing you can do is just increase the rate of publishing quality stories. If you just ignore traffic and you say, how do I make my site better? This is the barrier of what quality is. I want more of those, and then more people can read more of those. And you just ignore traffic for a while and you just focus on publishing more quality stories, good things will happen. That was kind of the leap that I made. And so how do we figure out how to publish more quality stories?
Yeah, and because I've been I've been in the SEO game since 2001. So I'm kind of older now. But the one thing that has been consistent since that time is the more content that you publish that's quality. In the beginning, it didn't have to be quality, but these days it's quality. So the more quality content that you publish, if you structure the site correctly, which is not that too hard these days, the organic traffic starts to grow. And if you then add a little bit of promotion, outreach, a little bit of strategy behind it, it can really start to accelerate, And so it's interesting how you explain it sounds so simple, and yet it's a bit of a process to find content, publish it, to edit it, and to do that consistently on a daily basis, and then continue on. How did you balance that in the beginning?
Part of it was self-motivation. How do I make it that Hacker Noon submissions are as good as what I would read on the rest of the internet? And try and get to that. And so that also forced the process of all the submissions in, I'm judging the order which I read them by the quality of which I deem their headline. Or the person who wrote it and whether I like reading them. So there was in the early days when it was just me publishing the stories, there's a selfishness. And it's how do I get to the stories I want to read, and getting upset if I get through my queue or I get near the end of the queue and they're not good enough. Let's go out and see who I can talk to or find new ways to get stories I will like reading in the morning. Now I'm publishing more 5 or 10% of the stories, and the editors are doing more of it. And I'm split between reading the stories in draft and reading them after they're published. So that area is a little less self-interested than it used to be, just in terms of spending my time. And it was, it took over because people wanted to advertise on it, and it was enough to pay for the, if once Hacker Noon was more in demand than my other clients, I was taking Hacker Noon money. So the goal is if I'm trying to make money, the simplest way is leave your job and get a consulting contract in your area of expertise. Mm-hmm. That's something anyone with some level of proficiency in the market, and that the market is hiring part-time people, you can do it. And that's how I started. And then it's okay, how do I scale? Because at the end of that, you can really only scale by scaling up your workforce and selling your workforce to somebody else. So I was really just searching for ways where it's my site. It's a thing that works while I sleep. It's a machine that keeps operating. And if I'm hit by a bust, it will continue to exist. And that means it has enough value that it can, grow without me. With or without me is if you can't grow without you, it's not a real business. It can still be a business, selling endorsements for athletes. Well, if the athlete's not there, they can't sell the endorsement, but that's a lot of money, but it's not the business in the sense of it'll outlive you, or it will, it can do stuff without you.
And so I'm assuming you had a lot of late nights with content editing in the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah, and a lot of early mornings.
Early mornings.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of, I had clients too, so I was writing for them, advising them how to grow their business. So that was like, it was a fun time. This was like the passion project, and then it took over, and then it's a little more serious. You have to like figure it out. But there's definitely, I mean, anyone considering, doing their own business, I would totally just set a window. When I left, it's like, hey, I can do this 6-8 months. Has to make more than it spends, and just trust yourself. Nothing like putting yourself in the, you need to get money more than you spend by a certain time frame to like figure out how to do it.
Yeah, sure. And so it must have been really exciting to see that organic traffic chart shooting up like in the early stages, right? Just because, I mean, if it were me, like, I would be looking at Google Analytics daily. I'd have the real time up, just on the side, so I could see like, how the real time traffic's going. Like, how was that experience? Just seeing that traffic starting to just really shoot up.
Catch-22, because you have those highs, and you're just like, look at that number, and then you're like, look at my bank account, and you're like, wait a minute, these numbers don't align. It's like, if you get traffic growing first, but there's not a good system to make money, you end up in this thing where like, oh, it's going to grow, but I can't spend on the things I want to spend on. If you don't have revenue, you're not investing, reinvesting in the business. So it's a lot of highs and lows, because you feel great about seeing the traffic, but not great about, coming up with a business model. And in our case, we ended up having sponsors, and 60% of our revenue right now is a 10 pixel tall yellow banner atop every page on the site. And that creates the incentive of just more time reading, more impression, no click through, no tracking, really simple ad that we sell directly to companies. And so that's kind of the stance we've taken on sponsorships and ads. And then we want to absorb companies' corporate blogs and tech releases, and be a trusted source where they can distribute their news. So that's kind of a little more the direction, we're headed in terms of how we work with tech companies. And
is that a subscription model? The one which you're talking about with companies, or is that coming soon and you can't talk about it yet?
Yeah, that is coming soon. So we've done more of post packages and buying, for republishing your blog, and buy 100, buy 10, and kind of like do it on a piece by piece. But yeah, we'll be moving brand publishing. We'll offer a subscription offering to, keep it stable, and just have a few more bells and whistles that we can start. Because once they're subscribing to us, then we can justify investing more in the software and the experience for brands specifically. Yeah. So we've invested a lot in for the writer specifically, and we're investing more and more for the reader. And brands experience, it's kind of like, we haven't really spent as much on it. So, we're looking to serve all three groups with Hacker Noon.
And it's I mean, the publishing industry over the last 10 years, from the newspaper or the downfall, like in inverted commas, right, like of the newspapers and like journalism has caused this real friction between publishing and monetization, and so that would be a really hard challenge, because on one hand, you got to the traffic which you got because it's been a pure, clean website. And then on the other side, you got to monetize it, because if you're getting that much traffic each month, I mean, you're going to have to be investing in ensuring the site's always up, that the site doesn't go down because somebody awesome, which you absolutely want, posts something and a couple million people just hit the site at the same time, And so how did you balance that challenge?
Surviving is the balance. There's definitely up and down. I mean, it's an interesting model now. So much of the money has moved from the publisher to the tech company. So that's like, excuse me. I tested negative for COVID recently, but I do have a little cold.
Okay, cool. Well, congratulations.
Thanks. I felt good afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, I still feel sick, but I feel way better. Sorry, David.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. And then, one thing that really influenced me was learning more about the history of BuzzFeed. And, it came from the BuzzFeed founder was one of the co-founders at Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post built no relations with their sponsor and just plugged in Google ads or whatever other ad service they could. And everything was about building all their software and their system around that. And it's not integrated with how the company makes money. So the money, as the company spends all their efforts, you know, for contributors and readers to have a better experience, you know, that they get a better experience, it doesn't necessarily correlate with how much revenue they get. So that definitely influenced me of like, have a direct relationship with your customers, you know, have your sponsors buy from here. You know, they're buying because they trust the relevancy and the quality of the experience and for the readers. So I think it's owning the relationship with the customers is a big one. And I think also with subscription models, I think it's better. I'm more of a fan of kind of the Patreon and the individual creator than I am of Comcast. And I think as you look at individual creators connecting directly with their fans, that makes a lot of sense. The value of grouping together 10 or 100 or 1,000 sources, well, I can kind of do that on my own, you know, in terms of like how that works. So I think that's kind of where I ended up on like learning about this, but it's also depends on the industry. It depends on the content. Like there's not a set business model for anyone that's writing stories online. You know, for you, it's probably your blog is all about your clients. And the moment they sign that big check, you're like, oh, I justified the time on the blog. That was part of it. That's part of the buying journey. It's not like you want $1 from each one of your, you know, readers. And if they don't read it, they don't pay you $1, you don't gain a reader either. You know, so that's, people should kind of pick their own path when they're trying to make a business model. For us, we wanted to keep all of our content free. How do you do that? Well, 10 pixels on the page is going to go to this guy. And this guy's going to tell you he's launching his new open source tool and you can check it out and maybe build an app on it, you know, and then they win. So that's kind of the spot I ended up on it. But it depends on your company, depends on your field. Like there's not really, it's a bit of a free for all of like, it's not as simple as other industries where they know what the best business model is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's also like it's changed so much, it's changing so much, and nobody's really figured it out yet. And so you do have a real opportunity to create a new, what do they call it? A category. You can create a new way for publishers to publish content and to get paid for it, right? Because, you know, like I get super concerned about how journalism is kind of just going by the wayside a little bit because of the speed of social media, the speed of requirement of content, the speed of all these journalists having to write their own content and having to get ideas and not having time to research them properly because the news cycle is so quick these days. You know, it's a real concern. And so there's certainly a big opportunity, I think, to really open this up, right? And have, you know, people kind of share the news and actually have it corroborated or confirmed through sources. Like it's still a problem right now, the fact that like I can just say something and it can be referenced 20 times and I could have just lied, right? And so there is opportunity about that, but like just quickly, like could you talk about like your thoughts on the media industry, the journalism industry and so on, the papers, the places that we get our news?
Yeah, so I don't watch cable news anymore. That's, I think, a good first step that everyone can take. It's the commentary is so heavy. You know, I'd rather read the story in a simpler form than to, you know, hear it performed for me. So I think that's like, in terms of like health of citizens, I think health would go up a lot, mental health, if they just didn't watch the news and they read the news. So I think that's kind of a step I made in my own life that I would recommend highly to others. I mean, the newspapers, they consolidate a lot. You know, there's not that many companies that own all the newspapers in America. So all these small papers, they're mostly owned by other people. So there is something where like, was it that good? You know, in terms of print ads really working and local journalism working, like 50 years ago, was it really that much better than now? There's definitely less choice and the things were less dramatized, whatever, you know, all the different forms and spins of it. And I mean, I know I spend too much time on Twitter and like looking through the news that way. And now you're saying an algorithmic organization is the way to curate the version of this story. And then on top of it, it's like, okay, how do I just filter by stories that aren't paywalled? Or how do I filter by stories that are original reporting versus regurgitated? You know, so there's like search things that I'm hopeful companies can do better, you know, over time about how to find news. So that's in the echo chamber stuff. It's like, you see why it works. You know, if you're trying to say engagement is the answer of what you want when you surface content, what you want is engagement, you know, you just create sensationalism and bubble. And that like, if I publish what I like to 10 people that I know already like it, it's going to go great. It's going to go great. They're all going to like it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks for that quick aside. It's just I get super passionate about this stuff because it's the news, right? And it's what they tell us.
How are you consuming the news lately?
I've gone back and forth, like on channels. I stopped watching TV 5-10 years ago. I don't watch the news. I stopped reading the papers for quite a while, except for the business news. I was getting a lot of my stuff from social media, but then I stopped that too. Now what I do is I will get a few apps that are from the different like newspapers out there. So I'll get, say, for example, the one that's on the right, and then I'll get the one that's on the left, and then I will just read the one that's in the middle, and I'll just see what are the extreme opinions and then what's the one in the middle, and I'll try to make my own assessment of the story. And then I will go and I'll have a look at the things that they say to corroborate it, or just to confirm that what they're saying is actually based in truth, and trying to read between the lines of what I'm being told, because I understand that they're a business and they're owned by people, and those people, they may have agendas or not. And so that's okay. And so being aware of that, to read what the US says about coronavirus, and then to read the South China Post, and then to read the Russian Today, right? And just to see what everyone is saying about the same thing and see how it changes, right? And then between all the stories, there's the truth somewhere, hopefully, right? And that's the way I try to keep across things without feeling like I'm being told what to think, if that makes sense.
That's a good way to do it. It's definitely good to read outlets that aren't aligned with your view on the, like, that's a good way to see, like, how do I circle around what the story is.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson was the one that basically opened my eyes to say, like if you believe something so much that it's the absolute truth, that's where all the worst things happen in the world, right? That's where all of the worst stuff happens in the world. And also, most people are generally wrong, and not everybody can be right. So then it is good to have some skepticism about how strongly that you believe something's true. If you believe it's absolute, is it absolute? Can it ever be absolute? Or is there another way?
It reminds me of something Sinbad said, the comedian. He calls them keyboard gangsters. And, once you're behind the keyboard, it's so much easier to be extreme and go further into these things that you really kind of believe. It's so much easier to go further because you're just you and your internet and your keyboard. And you don't have to actually explain like how you're going further down the rabbit hole to like a sane human sitting next to you. You can just go and you can document your path down it.
Yeah, exactly. But I am aware that we're going way off track, but I do love these conversations. I mean, I have these conversations for hours with friends and stuff, but let's come back to Hacker Noon, right? Because you've now got some traction, and then you bootstrapped it for a couple of years, but then you raised some money through a crowdfunding campaign. Yeah?
Yeah, so we did equity crowdfunding. So we raised $1 million from 1,200 people. So, kind of a smaller, sizable donation. We remain an entirely common stock company. And the strategy here was to build a software team, make our own platform, and have software be one of our competitive advantages. I mean, to me, if you're in digital publishing and you can't control the software, you're always going to be capped, and you're always going to have directions you want to go that you can't do. Like you just can't, you're going to wait for someone else to build it and then use it. It's kind of boring. Rather, just kind of build it and customize it for your needs. But equity crowdfunding, like it's a really cool idea. Came out in America. It started in 2015 from the Jobs Act, and it allows anyone to own shares in a private company. So, we had to do a lot of due diligence. Spent about $30,000 on lawyers and accountants and third-party reviews. So it's like, it's still like it's a pretty good cost, and it takes a lot of time to write the campaign. But I mean, for the most part, all we did was put the crowdfunding link atop our site and people click through. So, 85-90% of the traffic to the Start Engine crowdfunding page was from hackernoon.com. So it was like this cool thing of like, you're visiting a site, you can buy a stake in it. So that was kind of like what we played into of like how to grow. And then it also creates people like some of our largest customers have come from introductions from shareholders. So you have this little army of people that have a vested interest in growing this thing because they like this thing already and they see it could be bigger and better. So like in terms of aligning interests, it's a lot cooler to have 1,200 people that already like the site than one venture capitalist who thinks you have an interesting idea and may want to change the direction you're trying to take this thing, or you just have one partner who, that's it's a lot more fun to have the community owning a piece of it. And whenever I grow this thing in the future, that they're going to, be rewarded for believing in this.
Yeah, right. And so they actually own a part of it. Yeah. So like it's not like what are those other crowdfunding sites? Like Kickstarters and stuff. It's more it's equity crowdfunding. So they're getting a piece of the company. Is that right?
Yep.
How does that work exactly? Like is it like a large percentage? Is it a small percentage? Like how much have you given away?
With equity crowdfunding, the range is they've bought about 13% of the company for around $1 million as a group.
Yep.
So that's kind of the ballpark. You can go to startengine.com/hackernoon and they have the full, details of what they bought. But that's so it's
an $8 million company basically, like instantly overnight because of the crowdfunding, right?
Well, I would say because of the traffic it had, the market putting their wallets there validates that it was worth it. I think it was valuable. I thought it was valuable before crowdfunding, but it's nice to have 1,200 people say it is this valuable.
Yeah, and it's black and white as well. It's like because everyone thinks their company, their baby is like the best one in the world, right? But it's only when you get that external validation, and especially when it comes to valuations, it's absolutely black and white. Yeah. So when somebody spends money for a percentage, that's the value. That's absolutely black and white. And so, but it also shows like the passion and the quality of the company of HackerNoon, right? The fact that like you raised quite a lot of money. And I would suggest, I would think it probably wasn't that long because of the volume of traffic on the website. That must have felt pretty rewarding at that point.
Well, it was fun because you'd wake up, it'd be a different number each day. That was like, it was kind of fun to go through that process of like do work and then suddenly, 10,000 investor came in. You just see the number live in real time changing. So it had a little like, just like you're watching your sales meters and your startup numbers, it had a little bit of that for sure. That was pretty fun. Yeah.
It's like Google Analytics on steroids. Like it's stats that are money. That's why I would just love to see the Google ads, like the dashboard, like inside of basically inside of the Google headquarters to see just because we calculated it like back in 2016, like we did this chart on, I was like an infographic on kind of how much Google makes per second. And it was just out of control. And I was just thinking like, if that would be a cool report, right? But this is not like Google, but still super fun. But how long in terms of that whole process, right? So you launched the crowdfunding campaign. How long did it go for before you closed it off?
I mean, all the third-party reviews, it ended up taking about 2 months to go from when we decide to do this to when we put the page live. Mm-hmm. So, a good bit of work and time and money there in that front. And then I think we ended up running 5 months, something in that range. So it went for a good bit, actually.
Okay.
It's 1,200 people. It's a decent amount of people making decisions and over time. So, it's just like a marketing or a sales campaign or other ways of fundraising. It's effort. You're not going to just, even though most of the traffic was, and then most of the traffic's from HackerNoon that you have to keep working on. And you have to keep growing the thing so that the link at the top is, getting enough referral traffic to grow, the next thing. So it's a lot of work.
And so what are some of the biggest lessons or the best pieces of advice which you can share with people who are listening and who may be considering equity crowdfunding?
Just preparing for the marketing and sales side of it is a lot, and making sure you're making enough revenue that you can budget for the cost of fundraising. So that's whether you're flying around in the old way and meeting people and like trying to spend in the networking side of it, or you're building a marketing campaign or you're building your sales pitch, like it's a lot of upfront work. So I would say that. And then also it's like, what business models fit this? Why were we a good business for this? Is because we had a large community. We had a lot of people that had vested interest in this thing getting better. They want to read it. They want it to be a better writing experience. Like there were things that they selfishly wanted. So, I mean, if you look at like media and larger community driven sites, and I think people with large, Instagram followings and super fans like that, looking at saying, hey, how do I turn someone that really likes and believes in me into a shareholder? Like that's kind of the group where like, I think equity crowdfunding is going to grow a lot. If you're like trying to sell another shoe and most of the people that visit your sites are interested in shoes, you're probably not a great fit for equity crowdfunding unless like, hey, maybe you figured out Tom's, a mission-driven shoe company. But if you're not as mission-driven, equity crowdfunding is probably, less viable in a lot of ways.
So mission-driven is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's being a free location to hopefully learn anything. That's kind of like where we would like to get of like the cool parts about the internet to me are that the whole all these libraries are online. You can learn so much, and then like you go to college and you're like, oh, I need my JSTOR login, if you want to learn. So like, there's a lot of just like people putting a lot of stuff online for free, and like, how do you actually level up human knowledge as a whole? The internet has a real chance to be a huge part of that, but it's more likely that, it becomes the next TV in terms of business interest and the incumbents making it more like Comcast. Like TV could have been like this, not like this, but it could have been much, much different about how many people could submit content to TV as opposed to like how many levels of barriers there are. So we'll see. It's hard to give up market share. Once you have it, it's hard to change your business model once you decided like that's the way it should work. Yeah,
for sure. And so you spoke at the very start and you mentioned that you're investing quite a lot in the platform itself, like in the tech behind the platform. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we built a content management system atop Firebase. We had a $100,000 grant from Google to start this. So we're just kind of towards the end of that. So we haven't really been paying hosting much in a while. Then we also built with Next.js and Versal more recently. So writers can log in, write posts. We built an editor with Slate.js. So it's an editor is something that's just a constant iteration. Like a text editor never ends. You just keep finding these little use cases that you have to optimize for. So it just continues and continues. And then stats for writers. And then readers can do things like react to stories with emojis, bookmark, choose their subscriptions, customize their emails, stuff like that. So it's been pretty fun to make software and just like control where the button goes and like learn. It's just kind of fun. I don't know. I've started to like it more and more as I've done it more.
Have you always been into software, or was this the first kind of forced requirement to get into software?
So my degrees in school were economics and creative writing. After that, I was
no.
But after my first like serious job, because I was a newspaper reporter for a little bit, small town. But my first like serious job was a tech startup, and so like day one was like, I'm the first American, the first marketing person. I'm going into a meeting with a bunch of European software developers and the CEO, and just like I was just shadowing of like how they build and learn. So it was the value I was adding was much more writing and story and messaging, but the only other people in the room were software developers. So, I kind of learned a lot about it. And also just like, once you become like the public facing person of it, or you're interacting with company channels, you get all the complaints of the software and you learn like how much the software is like, okay, how did that complaint happen? Like, why doesn't it work the way we thought it would? Or like, why did we think this was so obvious and they like can't get to the next stage? So it definitely created a lot of thinking like that like now I habitually do. And I hate my phone and I hate the computer and I don't like the way it works. And you get frustrated and distracted. So, we'll probably want a phone company next.
But the reason that you created your own platform is so that you could have full control over how people engage with it, what extra features. Is that the reason?
How it works. If you don't control the software, you don't control how it works. The ceiling of a company.
What was lacking before? Because like you said before, if you publish the right content and if you publish it regularly, things go up, and they have for you, right? But now you're saying, actually, there's another level. What's that next level that the software is going to help you kind of get to?
Well, before we were working with Medium's content management, medium.com. And so that like hit a limitation where they were putting paywalls on stuff and pop-up account creation ads and all this kind of stuff where like it's creating value for other people that aren't the writer or aren't the publisher. So there, there's like that trade-off of like just providing experience that doesn't have the negatives, that doesn't have the tracking Google ads and stuff like that, where you're like, hey, those are softwares that are like, I understand why they exist. It's just not for me. So, that, and then even if you're looking at like, hey, I'm going to go build on Ghost or WordPress, it's like, it became a matter of your directions are limited. You can't just like, you can put a plugin in, but you can't control the way a page works. You can't control the way data flows. You can't control, even something, look at emoji reactions. It's like, how do emojis get stored? How are they floating around? How do they aggregate? Like once you own the system, you build the system, you can control the different ways it works. So there's just like, you're just only going to get so big. Why does the New York Times have such a large tech team? Their tech team is massive. Their tech is all built exactly for what they want. And they have billions of dollars, over $1 billion a year in subscriptions, so then that's like an online experience they've created. So you just get capped as a media company. And you see it, like, if you want to look at in the reverse way, is you look at how a venture capitalist talks about it. Media companies have 3x revenue evaluation. Software companies have 10x evaluation. And they just look at their little rule of thumb. Yeah. Like, which one are you? Okay, let's multiply your revenue. So there's like that rule of thumb valuation, and it's real though, because we could take our content management system and build 50 more sites, because it's our software, and it's not the same as, hey, we're going to take WordPress and white label it and say it's Smooke Press. And now we have so there's a level there of like, what are your actual growth paths? And like software is something like with the Noonies is a voting software we built. And, now we're going to put it in more types of voting locations, and we build it. And now we have a software that allows people to vote on different items and like securely vote and track votes and that stuff. So there's an element of how do you grow? And sometimes with software, it allows you to be horizontal as opposed to just saying, I'm just building hackernoon.com.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just on the point around the inline emoji reactions, when I was reading about that, I thought this is really cool. And this is where you can actually, maybe you should explain it. Could you explain, what?
So we built some pixelated emojis, because we love 8-bit stuff and just kind of the ode to the old internet. And these emojis, you can react at the story level or the paragraph level or the word level. So you can just highlight some text and react to it. And then you kind of get, what we're trying to get towards is how can a reader convey value to the writer in the least amount of work? So, as you look at saying, hey, I could like it, and you click one button at the top and you don't know what section of the content they liked. So actually getting the reactions to where the content is in the story is much more valuable information to share with the writer and share them specifically what resonated in the story. So just like, on the opposite side of it, looking at where they drop off the story is, also very useful information, or where they provide a thumbs down. So we kept the thumbs down in as one of the 4 default reactions. And it was mainly because like, what do you say if someone has a grammar error? What do you say if you disagree? We don't want people to use it to hate on people. So we didn't put it at the top of the story. So that when you first get to the story, you can't say it's negative because you haven't read it. But if you get to a part where you're actually reading, you can give, a thumbs down and a negative feedback. So like figuring that out was kind of fun, of just like, how do I not be the platforms I hate?
Good one. Good one. And is that information public as well? Like, so
not yet. Some of it is now, but it's not driving curation as much as it will. So as we start to think about how do you filter content, and whenever you're looking at the different emojis, we're going to do more there. But right now it just aggregates the total number of emojis that people did on the story.
It'd be cool, like because there's so much content to read, right? Like I get like my the Pocket app, right? Like I just have saved so many stories that I just never get to, because when I get to them, they're like 7,000 words, 20,000 words, 10,000 words. Content's gone out of control, and so having a way to scroll to where all the emojis are and see why did people like that and why did they not like that. That'd be really cool. Just helping people consume the best parts of content as curated by others, I think that's just a really that's a really cool feature. So I'm starting to get just why creating the platform itself is so much better for the reader as well,
Yeah.
You also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but does the tech also have a component of blockchain in it?
Yeah, so we've done a couple blockchain experiments. So most recently, we integrated with Coil and their build-atop Interledger, which is an open protocol built by the Ripple staff. So with that one, writers can put their payment pointer, and when Coil subscribers who pay $5 a month read their stories, they'll stream small payments directly to their Uphold wallet. So that's happening in the browser. So writers, we're making no money on that. It's just right now the Coil subscribers go directly to the HackerNoon writers. So it's kind of an interesting use case in terms of I love that like streaming payments can happen in the browser without disrupting the reading experience whatsoever. And you just have pennies, all the time, moving around, and it's something where the reader doesn't have to take an extra action to do. One thing I like about the Coil model is like, what do you consume online? Give them that portion of my budget based on how much I consume it. Just they earned it, So that's the area where I really like, the direction they're headed and why they're a good partner for us. So that's been our most, successful blockchain experiment so far.
And what's so cool about that experiment? It's actually one of the only ones I've heard of that's actually live in the world. I'm sure there's a lot, by the way. I'm sure there's plenty.
You see the price of Bitcoin today?
Yeah, let's just jump on that quickly, right? Because the date today that we're recording is Thursday, the 19th of November, right? That's in Australia. You're probably Wednesday, 18th there. But it's almost 18,000. It's 17,785 right now because I've got the little thing at the top of my browser, so I can always. It's on there 24/7. It's almost at 20K again.
Yeah,
got pretty close. What do you think's the cause of that, or what do you think's the driver of that right now?
So price speculation. Bitcoin has a lot of speculation in it. The way I like to think about it is Bitcoin is the mascot of digital currency. It's not the best one really in any way in terms of different functions, but because it's the mascot, it's created a store of value effect, much like gold. And the fact that, you have these billionaires keeping 15% of their money in Bitcoin and stuff like that is huge, in terms of whales and perception and like people buying and holding it. So I think like for the industry as a whole, so by industry, I more mean digital cash as opposed to specifically blockchain-based currency, just that blockchain has proved to be possible to make digital currency without a central entity. It doesn't mean it's the best thing that will exist to do that role, but it's proved that it's possible. So that's huge because, to me, the credit card fees are why? Why? It's just like, if you just look at a bank account, there's just so many fees where you're just like, why? And is the central entity helping? Well, what the central entity really has helped with historically is trust and making over time to believe that the currency remains this amount. If community trust is high enough that amount is true, the central entity isn't needed anymore. So I think that's a direction that cash is definitely going. And Bitcoin's part of the story. It's not going to be the end thing of, how I pay you and you pay me is kind of where I see it. But because it's such an important part of the story, I think it's a good store of value, and the market reflects this, and it'll go down again. But in the long run, it's going up, in my opinion, still. Yeah,
some people in our team are suggesting that it could either go to 100K, because some people are speculating 100K. Like if it hits 20, it's going to hit 30, it's going to hit 50. What do you think?
I guess price prediction. I think.
No, what do you think, just as a personal opinion, right? Like,
I think a year
not
from
to
now,
invest. This is not investment advice, to be clear, but just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's there's a world where digital cash takes off and Bitcoin goes down. So if I fundamentally believe digital cash is taking off and it's just going to continue, and the paper dollars and the penny shortages in America and all these things of that is just that larger trend, and that's going to keep happening. So how to capitalize on that trend? Bitcoin is one way to do that, but it's a lot of energy on the transactions. It's still not as private as some people would like it for different use cases. And then for other use cases, there's Bitcoin, billions, so much Bitcoin sitting in empty wallets, and people don't know, is that money like not accessible because they lost their private keys and it's out of the economy? Yeah. Or is it, hey, they're going to, 10 years from now, you're suddenly just going to see it move. So there's things in Bitcoin where, like I said, the mascot is how I always think about it in my head. You think about digital cash as the truth, and that's the way cash is headed. And then what Bitcoin is doing is like a parody of that almost. Like it is true that it's doing it, but it's also just like the face, and it's a good name. They kind of, however, in the story, like I love, having an anonymous founder or a group of founders and not having a company at the core of it. Whoever did that, they get it. Like, hey, the story needs to be decentralized at the core for the thing to grow up, even if that person is sitting on so much Bitcoin right now, they're just laughing their ass off that they think that because there's not a company, it didn't make me everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But the story is just, it fits the technology. When the story fits the technology, you can get a lot of adoption.
And what do you think about the blockchain space? Well, the first time I heard about it, I was like, this is going to change everything. And I still believe it's going to change everything, but I thought it was going to change everything quicker than what has happened. And last 2 years have been pretty low in terms of the whole industry across the board. But so where do you see it going?
I mean, like many exciting industries, there was just too many scams in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that hurt a lot of credibility, but it also was a usability problem and a UX problem of, if you're going to build a decentralized X, it's like how many different layers do you have to build just to get what you could get out of the box today? So the infrastructural challenges of the industry were just underestimated by most. And say, even if you had a good idea and a good use case, you're end up spending 90% of your dev work on this infrastructure stuff that doesn't affect the user experience. So that's, it's just a lot of work in that way that was underestimated by most people. Really, the blockchain solutions to grow adoption, they have to be as plug and play and as simple as the alternative. And it just needs to be, hey, I'm choosing the blockchain for this reason, to not deal with surveillance capitalism or whatever your reason happens to be. Mm-hmm. Blockchain treats that use case slightly better. And then you have to do no extra work to install it or to integrate it. And it's the same amount of work if you were taking a competitive solution that's not blockchain based. And so when that is closer to true, we'll be in a better spot. But I do think blockchain may not be the best solution to digital cash. And digital cash could grow. Digital cash with a zero transaction fee is something that I think will get closer to existing, and it may or may not be a blockchain-based solution.
What will it be if it's not a blockchain-based solution? You don't know?
I'm leaving the door open here of just saying, that if that's the thing you're trying to solve for, there's many people thinking about it, and it could be something different, but it could be blockchain, and blockchain is
Hackernoon cash. Yeah, no, for sure. And this is one last point, and we'll see how long this goes for. But you get to be across a lot of tech stuff, like, just being across all the Hackernoon stories and so on. So what are some of the coolest tech, I guess, innovations that you're seeing coming in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, AI is pretty exciting in general for somewhat, bittersweet causes. Like, looking at how artificial intelligence is absorbing customer support is kind of wild. And scheduling is something where it's getting closer, and that's, those two are big. I mean, there's a lot of people doing those jobs. I mean, and then, you look at the different machines powering the Amazon warehouses, that's also a lot of jobs. So some way, like, what is disruptive technology? If it eliminates marginal costs, that can sometimes be the technology that makes a lot of money, even at the expense of other people, where it's not as exciting, so. Yeah. But the cool thing about AI ones are more like, hey, how can the small business owner be helped? Well, if they don't have to deal with scheduling, customer support, or those things are like funneled down to an effective, I only get to the actual ones that matter, and the noise, my machine deals with the noise, gets me the decisions, I make the decisions. How to get your workday towards like non-mindless work. Because, you always get to a point where you have to copy and paste. Isn't that kind of mindless work? Like, there's something where like those technologies are exciting. And I think getting better at writing, which is like a little scary, like making machines that can write books and the different stuff like OpenAI is doing specifically. There's some, it's still a lot of data in the early days, but like, you read about sports, like a baseball report can get pretty close of just them translating a box score into human language and learning from it And it's like you can get kind of the story of the game, especially with baseball, where it's kind of boring, and it's very like they swing, they either miss, they get a single, or they get a double, they get a triple. Like there's not as much like fluidity as football or basketball.
Got it. And so I did read an article, I forget which publication it was. It must have been Hacker Noon. I'm joking. But where the AI had written the whole article, and it says, "Hey, I am artificial intelligence, and I'm the entity that is writing this article." And it went on, and it was a really good article. And the whole point of it, and I just assume it was AI. Look, this is one of the things that I didn't check, right? So you can't quote me on it. But the whole point was that this article was created by AI. Now, if AI starts to write our news, what would be some of the concerns about that?
Yeah, knowing whether it's an AI or not is pretty important. I mean, we've done the same thing. The Next Web has a series that's actually pretty good. There's been a few companies that are doing these kind of cool, like my AI wrote this. And I mean, if an AI reads all of Shakespeare and I haven't read all of Shakespeare, and you tell them to write like Shakespeare, they're going to do it better than me. Like it's all about the data set, and they can learn with a large data set, and they can learn a lot. So I mean, with news specifically, humans, you need them. You need like the headlines. You need to know, like if you're trying to break news and it's misleading and wrong, it's it could have massive effects. And I mean, that's where if one person puts out a misleading or wrong thing and the algorithms push it further, we've really hurt everyone involved in the situation. So, more review. Trusting your sources has been getting tougher, and it's going to keep getting tougher. It's just it's a very difficult problem.
The biggest, one concern I would have is that if AI is writing the article, right, and if the article is then seen, and this is kind of how fake news proliferates, right? You create like an article, and then you create a bunch of other sites that all link to that article, and they're all the sources, and then you create a bunch of other sites that link to that. It's like a blog network that SEO companies have used in the past, but now it's done for content creation. I would say that would be a real challenge because they don't have any cost of creating content. It's just the machine that makes it, and they can just create a web of content that supports itself, and I think, I think AI is really awesome. The application of it and how it's coded it's still coded by people, and the singularity, which is, I think they said 2042 or something like that, and we don't know what life is going to be like, after that. I like life now. Life now's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm happy to be alive as well.
Yeah, where do you see it like eventually going, I
mean, the stuff you're talking about is scary, and you combine it with the deep fakes, and like, that's pretty scary too. You can spread fake news, and then you can have a video that shows the leader validating that the news that is fake is real. And then you have because once you get to like text fake news is like, you're looking at the source and you're looking at text, and font looks the same to everyone. And that's the thing. Like once you see a face actually saying the words, your inclination to believe it real is so much higher. So that's where also very scary.
Yeah. I don't even know where to go with this. Listen, this is a good chat. Yeah. Like I really, let's just leave it there for now. Right. I could go down a rabbit hole right now. This is not the Joe Rogan show. So we'll just, we'll stick to growth and marketing and stuff like that. Hey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's such a good, congratulations on the success of Hacker Noon. I'm excited about, what's coming next. If there was one thing that you want people to do as a result of listening to this podcast, what would it be?
Well, read Hacker Noon is a great option. But we have tech company news pages coming out. So we're going further down the route of telling the story of the different tech companies, because we've done a good job of saying, hey, this is the person, this is the technology. So like the what and the who, and then the why and the how they're building it. But how does the money come in? What greases the wheels? So we're using the Bing News API to aggregate news from around the web, put it next to business overview information like employee counts and Alexa traffic, and then mentions on Hacker Noon. So in terms of like getting more of your tech company news from Hacker Noon, we hope to do that. And always anyone can submit a story on HackerNoon. It's just publish.hackernoon.com, and you get into our editor. You can submit it to an editor. You'll hear back in 2 to 4 days. And so you can tell your tech story, your business story, your software story, your crypto story, and publish with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David, for coming on the podcast. This has been such a cool chat. We've gone on to more tangents in this podcast than I normally do.
If we don't do tangents, what's the point?
Life's all about the tangent, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. I just keep looking at your tree in the background, by the way. It's such a beautiful tree. That's gigantic.
Thanks.
How big is that tree?
Maybe 30, 35 feet. It's not mine. It's out my window, but it's not my tree. It's out
your window, yeah. But listen, mate, this has been such a good conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast. We'll speak soon.
Cool. Thanks again. See you.
Thanks, man. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Growth Manifesto podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. For more episodes, please visit growthmanifesto.com/podcast. And if you need help driving growth for your company, please get in touch with us at webprofits.io.